Night Springs is the first of 2 announced DLCs for Alan Wake 2. I've played through it a few times now, and I'd like to share my thoughts on it. This video will contain spoilers for pretty much every Remedy game, because some element of pretty much every Remedy game has been woven into the story of Night Springs. In a lot of ways, the main campaign in Alan Wake 2 felt to me like a tribute to Remedy's previous games, and I interpreted a lot of its systems and story to be a sort of meta statement on the relationship between Remedy, their games, and the people who play them. Despite seeming to have a very positive working relationship with Rockstar, the owners of the Max Payne IP, Remedy really towed the line of what could be seen as copyright infringement with their depiction of Alex Casey. Being so bold with these choices, but altering the fine details just enough to make things legally and creatively distinct, allowed for Remedy to make their previous non-canon games more congruent with the current Remedy-connected universe. As Sam Lake put it, we are making questions possible and giving ideas to people that they can then form their own theories. From that perspective, Night Springs gives even more ideas to consider while theorizing about this world. I'll cover each of the 3 new episodes of Night Springs and talk about how I feel they fit into the big picture. If you like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing to Hidden Machine. We've got weeks worth of videos here on the channel, including a ton of videos discussing all things Remedy. And if you really want to go the extra mile, check out the Patreon and our channel memberships. Even $1 a month goes a long way to helping us do what it is we do here on the channel, and also on our second channel, the Hidden Machine Annex. So check it out, there's links down below, and in the meantime, let's get into the rest of this video. In my opinion, Night Springs might be the most definitive statement yet that Remedy has made regarding the rules and logic of their connected universe. In my opinion, they really didn't say anything new, but instead clarified some ideas that I think were maybe left a bit more ambiguous in the past. There are 3 playable protagonists in Night Springs. These look like familiar characters, but they aren't exactly who they appear to be. In an interview given around the time of the release of the expansion, Kyle Rowley, who is one of the directors on Alan Wake 2, stated, "These aren't the characters from the actual stories of Alan Wake and the other games that we've made. They're Night Springs echoes of them. So there's nothing directly connected to any of the stuff that we've done in previous games lore-wise or name-wise or anything like that." He went on to call the characters in Night Springs reflections or echoes. In that same round of interviews, lead writer Clay Murphy stated, "These are characters inspired by the real people that Alan Wake has seen visions of in the Dark Place, a process we established in the main game." We know that while in the Dark Place, Alan Wake can see glimpses of reality. He pulls from those visions and uses them in his writing. According to an article written by GameSpot's Mark Delaney, the 3 episodes of Night Springs in this expansion are all failed attempts by Alan to write his way out of the Dark Place. This is almost identical to the premise of Alan Wake's American Nightmare. However, in that story, Alan Wake is the protagonist, the champion of light. At some point in his time stuck in the Dark Place, Alan decided that he needed someone else to save him, a hero that could traverse the Dark Place and pull Alan out. By my interpretation, in American Nightmare, the Alan Wake that we play as isn't the only Alan Wake existing at that moment. There's another version of Alan who is at the typewriter, creating a world that this other version of Alan is being projected into. This theme is explored more in depth throughout Alan Wake 2, especially in the relationship between Alan and Thomas Zane, and then between Zane and Casper Darling. As players, we can see that these are the same actors creating all of these characters, and it gives them an undeniable connection, which is always present, even though these are all distinctly different characters. When they acknowledge feeling a shared sense of familiarity, it almost feels as if Zane and Darling are beginning to break down the fourth wall. If Remedy is going to continue to use the same actors in their games, and continue to explore the idea of multiple layers of reality all affecting one another through a series of echoes and twisted mirrors, it would make sense for them to find a way for characters in their stories to reconcile this phenomenon. And it would make sense for Remedy to give us as fans a way to reconcile this phenomenon. I think we should keep that in mind while exploring the Night Springs DLC. In the first new Night Springs episode, Number 1 Fan, we play as the Waitress, who is an echo of Rose Marigold. She works at Night's Diner, an inversion of Bright's Diner in Bright Falls. The Waitress is a die-hard fan of The Writer. In this scenario, The Writer is responsible for a trilogy of crime thrillers, starring a character named Will Hurt. The 3 books are titled Will Hurt, Death Will Hurt, and Love Will Hurt. This really sets the tone for the sort of meta imagery that we'll see all throughout this Night Springs DLC. The Waitress is an echo of Rose Marigold. The Writer is an echo of Alan Wake. These books are an echo of the Alex Casey books written by Alan Wake. They also echo the Max Payne games created by Remedy Entertainment. In the first Alan Wake game, our few encounters with the world of Alex Casey let us know that Remedy was making a very intentional nod to Max Payne. The covers of the books are in the same style as the cover of Max Payne 2. Alex Casey used dual Berettas, just like Max Payne, and both Alex Casey and Max Payne were voiced by the late James McCaffrey. Throughout Alan Wake 2, the references to Max Payne become even more apparent, but at the same time, the role of Alan as the creator of the Alex Casey novels gains more significance in the overall story. In the first Alan Wake game, Alex Casey was really just a sort of small Easter egg, a fun reference to Remedy's previous games. Initially, his mythology was just an echo of Max Payne's story, but since then, the character has been allowed to grow and become more independent from the character he was inspired by. Still, even with that newfound independence, the characters of Max Payne and Alex Casey are inextricably linked. For me, and for many other players, that link extends to other characters in the Remedy Connected Universe and beyond. There's former director Trench from Control, the bright presence in Alan Wake. There's Sam Lake, as in the character that appears in the Alan Wake games. There's even the Storm Commander from Remedy's Lost mobile game, Agents of Storm. These characters are all connected in different ways, but those connections are all rooted in the characters being portrayed by Sam Lake and James McCaffrey, sometimes separately and sometimes together. Through these connections, the characters can all be read as echoes of one another. There are other types of echoes present in the Remedy Connected Universe. Sharing actors or voice actors is the most prominent type of echo, but sometimes they can be more subtle. At a certain point, it's almost impossible to tell which ones were created intentionally and which ones are just the byproduct of Remedy creating an increasingly expansive series of works. Either way, these echoes have ripple effects on the world around them. For instance, Rose Marigold, who is obsessed with Alan Wake and his novels, shares a name with the deceased daughter of Max Payne. Is it possible for these two Roses to be connected in some small way? And if so, is it that connection that draws Rose Marigold toward being such a fan of the Alex Casey novels, and in turn for the Waitress to be such a big fan of the Will Hurt trilogy? As players, we can see these echoes and make these connections, even though the characters themselves might not be aware of the connections. However, as I've come to notice throughout Alan Wake 2 and its Night Springs DLC, it's beginning to seem to me as if some of the characters can feel the presence of these connections, even if they don't fully understand what it is that they're experiencing. Going back to the waitress, we see that she lives in an idealized world where everyone loves her. It's a bit heavy-handed to say this, but she's seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. Somewhat literally, with the saturation and color palette being shifted to a warm and dreamy look that's miles apart from the base game. Early on in her episode, the waitress receives a distress call from the writer, who makes contact through a decorative talking fish, a theme that was first referenced in the RCU back in Control. The waitress sets out to save the writer, and along the way runs into his evil twin brother, the bad boy. He lets her know that he's locked the writer up and that he has an army of haters who will keep her from rescuing him. Rose follows a blazing path left behind by the bad boy and his motorcycle, battling the haters all along the way. Eventually, she catches up to the bad boy, who reveals himself to be a werewolf, and also his motorcycle is a werewolf too. She defeats the bad boy, spares his life, and rescues the writer. They embrace, and presumably live happily ever after. This episode contains multiple echoes of other Remedy stories. The waitress is strung along by the bad boy, who keeps claiming to have the writer, but continues to pull tricks on the waitress to distract her. This is very reminiscent of the kidnapper from the first Alan Wake game, stringing Alan along, claiming to have his wife, Alice. The bad boy is an echo of Mr. Scratch. In Alan Wake 2, Scratch dons a bit of a biker persona after killing Jaakko Koskela. At one point in this episode, we see a room where the bad boy intended to torture his brother. This is very reminiscent of the torture scenes from Alan Wake's American Nightmare. This room is in the upstairs portion of a cabin, and while playing, I couldn't help but be reminded of Alan ascending the cabin stairs to meet Alice early on in the first game. For me, the combat in this episode is also reminiscent of American Nightmare, with a much stronger focus on action than was present in the base game. At the end of American Nightmare, Alan Wake reunites with Alice Wake, and the tone of this scene is similar to when the waitress finally reaches the writer. I also view the waitress herself as an echo of the Remedy fandom. I've seen a ton of Alan Wake fan art like this online, and the waitress's quest to save the writer feels like a reflection of us as players going through the events of Alan Wake 2. The waitress has a shrine to the writer out in the woods, and here we can see a page from a Will Hurt novel. It reads just like a monologue from Max Payne, and it was impossible for me not to hear this in James McCaffrey's voice. The text here is interrupted by a message from the writer to the waitress. In Alan Wake 2, Rose swears up and down that Alan had been communicating with her and sending her secret messages through various means. Due to the swirling nature of the dark place, I have to wonder if this story about the waitress influenced Rose's reality in some way. Beyond that, I have to wonder if all this talk of secret messages is at all intended to reference the way that many Remedy fans go to great lengths to seek out hidden meaning in the games. The second new episode of Night Springs, Northstar, feels a bit less meta to me, and is largely a retelling of the events of Control. We have the sibling here, an echo of Jesse Faden, who herself is an echo of Beth Wilder from Quantum Break. An echo of Polaris is here as well, and we have an echo of Tim Breaker, who is an echo of Jack Joyce from Quantum Break. The sibling is on a quest to find her brother. She's been chased by a shadowy government agency her whole life and isn't sure who she can trust. Through her search, she happens upon Coffee World. and while it looks similar to its counterpart in the reality of Alan Wake 2, it's now under new management. The park is full of shaded individuals, reminiscent of The Taken. The sheriff is there to investigate what he believes to be a government conspiracy. According to him, someone is putting something in the coffee and it's making people disappear. Continuing with the Control references, the role of the Hiss is taken on by Dark Triangle Coffee. The coffee is taking over people, one by one. Similar to the way the Hiss tried to invade Jesse's mind but was thwarted off by Polaris, the siblings' North Star protects her from the influence of Dark Triangle Coffee's mind-altering propaganda. In order to progress, the sibling must drink some of the coffee, and once she does, she's allowed to enter the Dark Triangle warehouse. Drinking the coffee also allows her to read these glyphs. She eventually makes her way into the depths of the Dark Triangle operation, where she finds the brother, who looks a lot like Alan Wake, levitating inside of a containment chamber. He greets the sibling, letting her know that he wants to tell her about a dream that he had. This scene is a direct reference to interactions that Jesse Faden has with her brother Dylan in Control. The story ends here, and while I feel that there isn't a whole lot to take away from it, it's interesting to see Alan in this role. This is the second time we've seen Alan in his outfit from the first game. We know that these episodes are failed attempts to escape the Dark Place, but we don't really know when they occurred. Regardless, for me, seeing him in this outfit does make it feel distinct from the events of the main campaign in Alan Wake 2. The third new episode, Timebreaker, is the most involved one, and I think it really does a great job at tying together the themes established in the first two episodes. We play as Shawn Ashmore, or as he's referred to in the subtitles, the actor. Now, this is Shawn Ashmore as in a fictional version of the actor from our reality. He's working with Sam Lake, who is a creative lead at Poison Pill Entertainment. This is already super meta, and pretty much every line in this story works as a reference on some level to something Remedy related. I especially got a kick out of this line, where I can't help but think that Sam Lake is poking fun at overzealous fans who believe that their theories or interpretation of Remedy lore can be the only correct way of seeing things.
You clearly have your own vision of the multiverse.
The right vision, the truth.
Sam has stated that while he does have his own vision, he doesn't see any one theory as more or less valid than any other one. While the idea of there not really being any truth might be disheartening for some fans, for me, it's a very liberating thing to hear. It's a meaningful acknowledgement of how much fun it can be just to ponder these things. It's about the ride more than the destination. And it's about Remedy creating worlds where they can tell stories and create mysteries for us to explore. And while it might seem anticlimactic to know that it isn't all necessarily leading to one ultimate truth, Remedy has been pretty open about that for a very long time. In Max Payne, Max actually rejects the opportunity to look deeper into the mysteries and connections surrounding the Acer Corporation. This is a chance for him to really get a good look behind the curtain. The answers are all there in front of him, but he has other priorities. Alan Wake opens by telling us that there's little fun to be had in explanations. When Sam Lake in the game says that he has the right vision, it's the exact opposite of what the real-life Sam Lake has said, just like a poison pill could be seen as the opposite of a remedy. Sam Lake here is holding a script, and the text foretells what's about to happen in the game. This is an echo of Alan Wake writing his manuscripts, leaving pages for people to find, pages where their futures are laid out before them. In that context, Sam Lake, the Night Springs character, is acting as an echo of Alan Wake, who himself I see as an echo of Sam Lake. The story of Alan's career, as is presented in the first Alan Wake game, is very similar to the story of Remedy Entertainment itself. I wouldn't call Alan a self-insert type character, but they are both creators whose experiences have often mirrored one another. In Night Springs, Sam and Sean are working together on a Timebreaker video game. They talk about how they have worked together in the past and are excited to be reunited, which I can't help but see as a nod to the real-life events surrounding Shawn Ashmore and his relationship to Sam Lake and Remedy Entertainment. He tells Sean about how his character will become an ultimate superhero type, able to travel between the different realities of the multiverse. In the past, Sam Lake has described Jack Joyce from Quantum Break as a superhero, with the game Quantum Break being that hero's origin story. After talking with Sam, Sean goes to his green room to look over the script and prepare for the next scene. As he approaches, he hears a violent conflict, accompanied by flashing lights. He sees what looks like himself slumped dead against a wall, but convinces himself that this is just Sam Lake playing an elaborate prank on him. Suddenly, a red-headed woman appears. She tries to explain the situation to Sean, but he's unexpectedly whisked away to a different reality, much like the scene where Tim Breaker is banished to the Dark Place by Door in Alan Wake 2. Sean remembers that Sam Lake told him his character would take an object called a PRS, a polyhedron reality shifter, and use it with an SEN, a shifter energy node, to activate a Luma Vista TV and ride the vortex between realities. Sam further explained that this is all tech from the REC, the Ripple Effect Corporation. Sean tells himself that he has to play the role of the multidimensional traveler, and he commits to finding the shifter energy node and making his way back to his reality. In the Timebreaker video game being made by Poison Pill Entertainment, Sean's character is searching for his lost love and is trying to track down a nemesis named Door. Door is traveling through different realities and murdering the other versions of Sean's character. This scenario carries over to Sean's reality, and he is confronted by corrupt copies of himself as Door torments him. Sean travels through several different realities, each one represented by a different shape. He finally reaches the edge of the multiverse, but Door is nowhere to be found. The way that Door leads the actor on throughout these different scenes is very reminiscent of the way that the bad boy was leading on the waitress in the first episode. At the end of the multiverse, Sean finds a computer where he plays a text-adventure style game. Suddenly, Sean finds himself in a world where words are just as real as anything else, and those words can dictate what he sees and experiences in the world around him. As he approaches this computer, the ground becomes increasingly littered with what looks like manuscript pages, except they're white ink on black paper, the inverse of what we're used to seeing. Once at the computer, Sean can take many different paths. Some paths are a short loop that seemingly go on forever, while other paths play out much more detailed stories, only to bring Sean back to where he started. Some paths will reconnect with the red-headed woman, or some other version of her. These paths have Sean exploring scenarios that blend together elements of Quantum Break and Control. Some paths even have Sean encountering a version of himself. However, unless he's caught in a loop, when played out, all of these paths eventually lead to an intended confrontation with Door. But when he finally reaches the threshold, Sean discovers that he's made a mistake. Door is referred to in this story as the Master of Many Worlds, and that's who Sean intends to find behind the spiral door. But the person we see here is clearly Alan Wake in the writer's room. or some echo of him. All 3 of these episodes of Night Springs culminate in their protagonists meeting an echo of Wake, but none of these stories see Wake successfully escaping the Dark Place. However, from what the games tell us, even Alan's unsuccessful attempts at escaping the Dark Place can have an effect on reality, just as much as reality can have an effect on Alan's writing. The story in Timebreaker makes a lot of references to Quantum Break. We see what looks like Martin Hatch finding the naturally occurring time machine described in his note to Jack Joyce. We have an echo of Shawn Ashmore, who is referred to as Branch. Branch brings to mind trees, an essential part of Remedy's lore, but it also reminds me of the branching paths in Quantum Break. Similarly, the last name Joyce always reminded me of the word choice. At one point, the red-headed woman is referred to as Lisa, which reminds me of Lisa Punchinello from Max Payne, the twin sister of Mona Sachs. Max and Mona are star-crossed lovers, and there is a mention of a similarly difficult relationship between the red-headed woman and Branch. In Quantum Break, Jack tells Beth that he'll come back for her. That "I'll come back for you" line is referenced numerous times throughout this episode of Night Springs. At one point, the red-headed woman is named Jezbet, a clear mashup of Jesse and Beth. Even the score in this episode mirrors Quantum Break, with the game's composer confirming the reference. The red-headed woman is referred to here as the Agent. Now, this could be reference to Jesse Faden as an FBC agent, or Beth Wilder as a security agent for Monarch Solutions. She explains the multiverse to Shawn, illustrating how different versions of a person can exist in different realities. This segment utilizes comic book style art and panels to tell its story, which is in part an obvious nod to that same technique being used throughout Max Payne 1 and 2. The art here was done by Christian Ward, who, at the time of writing, just recently announced a new book called Many Worlds. We'll have to check back in on that one once it comes out. The agent in this segment is associated with the Ripple Effect Corporation, which is a sort of amalgam of the FBC from Control and Monarch Solutions from Quantum Break. The term Ripple was used by Monarch Solutions to describe the sort of butterfly effect phenomena that they'd been tracking. It was these quantum ripples that put a spotlight on an alleged connection between Monarch Solutions and the Bureau of Altered World Events. In our reality, the Bureau of AWE appears to have been an early name for what would eventually become the Federal Bureau of Control. But in retrospect, it's easy to see the two organizations as echoes of one another in their respective realities. This whole sequence, combined with the numerous blatant references to Quantum Break, really feels to me like Remedy explaining as plainly as they can that all of their works are connected, just not necessarily in the ways that we as fans might want them to be. When we come to these games as players who are already familiar with Remedy's catalog, we can really see these ripple effects from a unique perspective. For me, that perspective is similar to how Door, the master of many worlds, is able to seemingly be in all places at once. But at the same time, those different places, those different realities, are still separated, and there's no guarantee that any two realities will ever truly fully cross over, even if there is some degree of them influencing one another. I've seen some people online suggest that the events of Night Springs aren't canon, and while I understand what those people mean, these events did occur in the context of Alan Wake 2, and are even directly acknowledged several times in the base game. These events don't necessarily have a lasting impact on the overall story of Alan Wake 2, but I would still call them canon. And it's all very similar to the way that Alan Wake's American Nightmare was confirmed as canon. In that game, Alan Wake defeated Scratch and reunited with Alice. Sam Lake confirmed that the game is canon. But in Alan Wake 2, Scratch was alive as ever, and Alice was still separated from Alan. Most of the events of Alan Wake's American Nightmare were very ephemeral, and could only be remembered by the characters of the game as a series of vague and distant memories, if they could remember them at all. For me, this same dynamic can be applied to the events of Night Springs. Even though Night Springs was explicitly described as a sort of what-if scenario, it doesn't mean that it's entirely disconnected from the main narrative of Alan Wake 2 and the Remedy-connected universe. One thing that players may be unaware of right now is that while these Night Springs episodes are accessible from the main menu, they have also been integrated into the story of the main game. Throughout Alan's campaign in the Dark Place, he can enter these episodes by interacting with televisions that he finds. Later on in Alan's campaign, there's a scene where he and Mr. Door have one last confrontation at the TV studio. Prior to playing the Night Springs DLC, we didn't really have the full context for what was being discussed in this interaction. Door says to Alan, all these rules, endless, convoluted loops you insist on going through. Door tells Alan that things have gone on long enough, both the current scenario and what he refers to as our Night Springs. He says that it was a nice distraction. He says that the next time they meet, circumstances will be very different, and Alan would do well to play his part. The convoluted loops that Door refers to seems to me to at least be in part an acknowledgement of Alan's writing constantly revisiting these same themes and major story beats. In the text adventure segment from Timebreaker, one possible life lived out by Sean's character directly mirrors the events of the first Alan Wake game, with Sean bringing his wife out to a lakeside cabin in the Pacific Northwest, only for her to either willingly plunge to her own death, which mirrors Alice's fate in Alan Wake 2, or entering a threshold into another part of the multiverse, mirroring Alice entering the Dark Place after falling from the balcony into Cauldron Lake. Alan Wake wrote this episode of Night Springs, meaning that Alan Wake is the reason that the echoes of his trip to Bright Falls appear in this scenario. Door also says that there are armies of people helping Alan. Again, going back to the text adventure, one possible branch sees Sean gathering an army made up of different versions of himself throughout the multiverse. In addition to that, when we consider all of the times Alan has written about people and used them in his attempts at escape, it does seem as if there is an army of people helping him, even if it's unwittingly or unwillingly. To pull back even further, on some level, all of us playing Remedy's games are also helping Alan. There's definitely more to learn about Door and his connection to Tim Breaker, as well as his connection to Saga and Alan, and everyone else in the RCU. The way that Door tells Alan to play his part reminds me of Shawn Ashmore deciding that he needs to play his part when he finds himself transported to a new reality, or Alan saying that he was taking on the role of the detective when he picked up Alex Casey's gun in the Dark Place. Picking up a gun is also what led Jesse Faden to take on the role of the director at the FBC. Door is referred to as the Master of Many Worlds, but that's also the title that Alan gives himself at the end of the final draft. Who is the true master here? Was Door just playing a part? When Door tells Alan to play his part, he says that Alan doing so would be returning a favor to him. This implies to me that Mr. Door is willingly participating in these episodes of Night Springs, both as a host and Alan's collaborator, but also as a villain in the Timebreaker episode. However, I have to wonder, is Alan only calling himself the Master of Many Worlds because he saw Door play this part in the episode? Is he attempting to take Door's role? If so, that sounds like something that could put these characters in direct conflict with one another next time they meet. I also wonder how much the events of these episodes impacted the reality of Alan Wake 2, or if it was reality bleeding into the dark place that inspired Alan to write these stories. One of the core themes of Alan Wake 2 is future events somehow influencing the past, or vice versa. This is something that I don't think we'll ever get a real clear answer for, but that's okay with me. For me, it's similar to the mystery surrounding Alex Casey and the murder cult. In The Dark Place, we can find an Alex Casey novel that describes the fictional detective looking for a murder cult. And we see what seems to be those events playing out in the echoes that Alan Wake encounters in The Dark Place. At the same time, Alex Casey, the FBI agent in reality, also dealt with a similar case. Which came first, the books or the events that inspired them? And where do the echoes fit in? Did time bend itself for one event to precede the other? We can't really know for sure, and accepting this is something that I think is essential to understanding the Remedy catalog as a whole. The last names of Beth Wilder and Paul Serene are a direct reference to a poem read to Alan in the first Alan Wake game. As players, we know the order of events, and we know that these two characters were deliberately given names that would recall Remedy's previous work. But at the same time, it's fun to imagine a world where Quantum Break somehow retroactively influenced the poem from Alan Wake. And if you're someone who experiences Quantum Break before playing Alan Wake, you're likely going to see it that way, at least initially. Remedy pulls from their own history so often, and if you experience their games out of order, it can seem like they've had this whole thing planned from the very start, going all the way back to their first game, Death Rally. In that game, you're competing in a series of races, hoping to eventually take on the king of the Death Rally, known as the Adversary. As you progress through the ranks of the Death Rally, you receive messages from True Tom, the spirit of a racer who died while trying to defeat the Adversary. In Night Springs, we can find a poster for a Finnish film adaptation of Death Rally, starring Thomas Zane. Is Thomas Zane the same True Tom that we spoke to in Death Rally? Playing Death Rally now with this newfound information gives the game an entirely different context and significance, and this sort of dynamic can be found all over Remedy's catalog. Past events influence future events, and those future events color our interpretation of past events. With every new entry, Remedy's back catalog is refreshed and given some new significance. For instance, players who dive into Quantum Break for the first time after playing Alan Wake 2 and Night Springs are sure to have a very different experience than those who played the game at launch, solely because Remedy has done so much to mythologize the story of Quantum Break and give it greater significance in the context of their works as a whole. Another example of this would be this tweet that Sam Lake sent out on October 14th, 2016. In Timebreaker, Sean can find this same drawing on a desk in a trailer belonging to another version of him. Did Sam Lake know all along what we'd be experiencing in Alan Wake 2 and its DLC episodes? Or is the inclusion of this image just another thing meant to stimulate wild speculation from the Remedy fandom? Ultimately, it doesn't matter. Whether you saw this image for the first time in 2016 or 2024, seeing the reference here is going to have an impact. You can look at it from different perspectives in time and take away different meanings, and all of them are valid in their own ways. This is the kind of thing that gets me even more invested in every aspect of Remedy's creative output. It's too soon for us to know right now where the story of the RCU will go next, but for now, Night Springs has given us a lot to consider. While the character of Tim Breaker is for sure not the same exact person as Branch or Shawn Ashmore, Tim does seem to be aware of the presence of the multiverse. In The Dark Place, he's having visions that directly echo the events of both Quantum Break and the Timebreaker episode of Night Springs, and he talks about experiencing other lives and having some memory of those experiences. In Timebreaker, Shawn Ashmore can hear the thoughts of other versions of himself. I think it's likely that Tim Breaker has some kind of similar ability, able to somehow tap into the mind or memories of other versions of himself from throughout the multiverse or other realities that exist in and around the RCU. And I imagine that we'll learn more about that in a future game. Another thing that Breaker mentions in his notes is that Mr. Door is a constant presence across all of these experiences. I think it's worth noting that in the Timebreaker episode, when Door speaks, he's named in the subtitles as Door. Every other character is referred to by the name of the role they are playing, but it would appear that Door is playing himself. Even though we've already established that Door was playing some kind of role, the fact that he's still referred to as Door, and the fact that he openly acknowledges his involvement in Night Springs suggests to me that Door is maybe the only character in the Remedy Connected universe who truly understands the multiverse and can travel through multiple realities while maintaining total lucidity, although that may also apply to Ahti. In Timebreaker, the agent explains that according to legend, Door found an opening to a parallel reality that gave him access to all realities. The subsequent feedback loop caused by this killed all other versions of Door, meaning that there is only one version of Door that exists. Now, we're hearing this information in the context of a script written by Alan Wake, so maybe the details aren't totally accurate. But given what we know about Door, and how Tim Breaker describes Door as being a constant presence throughout all of the different realities that Tim experiences, it seems likely to me that this description of Door is probably pretty spot on. While the Quantum Break references all throughout Timebreaker could be seen as a way to kind of acknowledge, appreciate, and move on from that storyline, I think it's just as likely that it's meant to prime us for those themes to be revisited somewhere in Control 2, or a future game that I don't even know about yet. Currently, it seems that Dr. Darling is still trapped in another dimension, likely the Dark Place, and I get the impression that he might be becoming aware of the idea of multiple versions of a person existing across different planes of reality. I mean, there's even a book we can find written by Dr. Casper Darling called My Interpretation of Many Worlds, which seems to me like a clear indication that he is aware of the multiverse. When Tim Breaker is referred to as Door's unwilling disciple, it seems to me like he's really being prepped to become some sort of multi-dimensional traveler, or a superhero somewhat akin to the role he played in Timebreaker or Quantum Break. I can't say anything definitively here, but I feel like there's a lot of room for the sort of multiverse-spanning adventure of Timebreaker to be reinterpreted and repurposed in future Remedy stories. And the way that the multiverse is presented here in this episode can give us a good perspective on the complicated series of echoes and twisted mirrors that make up the Remedy Connected universe and all of the stories and games that exist adjacent to it. Seeing the way that Shawn used the text adventure to create different realities and encounter different versions of himself and people he knows feels like an echo of the way that the Dark Place works, with Alan existing in a void and writing to create the world around him. And that same situation is an echo of the creative process that the people at Remedy Entertainment go through to make these games. For me, the whole thing really comes full circle, and I think that the Night Springs expansion is a great addition to the Remedy catalog. It's very interesting to me to see that Remedy hinted at the events of Night Springs with the song Sea of Night by Old Gods of Asgard. The liner notes written by Sam Lake indicate that the song was a hint of things to come. Remedy has used this move before, with the visions that can be found through the QR codes in Alan Wake Remastered describing the opening scene of Alan Wake 2, or the dreams of Dylan Faden heralding the arrival of Mr. Door, and Alex Casey. We can't know right now if Night Springs includes hints as to what might be coming next, but I wouldn't at all be surprised to find that it provides some kind of clue that we are yet to discover. It's also very interesting to remember that all of the things we saw in Night Springs came from Alan Wake. These are scripts written by him, attempts to pull himself out of the dark place. We know that Alan can look into reality for inspiration, but when we say that, we usually mean the prime reality of the Remedy connected universe. This is how he drew in characters like Jesse Faden or Saga Anderson. However, seeing as how much of Night Springs recalls the events of Quantum Break, it suggests to me that Alan can pull inspiration from many other realms as well. This appears to be confirmed by Mr. Door.
You keep opening doors, peeking in, reaching through to get what you want, and that puts you in my path.
I don't know what you're talking about.
In Timebreaker, the references to Quantum Break are so enormous and so blatant, and if all of those are coming from Alan Wake as the author of this story, it's totally plausible that Alan somehow received a vision of the events of Quantum Break. So it's my take that by the rules established here, if we call Quantum Break canon, and I'm using air quotes when I say that, it ultimately doesn't change anything. Quantum Break can take place in a reality entirely separate from the events of Alan Wake 2, and still have been an influence on the world of Alan Wake 2, thanks to the Dark Place and the Sea of Night allowing for echoes to carry out across the multiverse. For me, Alan taking a glimpse of Quantum Break and using it to write the Timebreaker episode of Night Springs is really not all that different from us as players seeing Tim Breaker and simply allowing our brains to make a connection between Tim and Jack Joyce, or Jack Joyce and Shawn Ashmore, or Shawn Ashmore and Branch. This mechanic is a perfect way for all of these things to exist both separately and very close together at the same time. Remedy could never openly acknowledge this, but with how extremely blatant their recent references to Quantum Break and Max Payne have been, combined with how they explain their vision of a multiverse, for me, Night Springs is Remedy's declaration that all of their games are canon, even if these canon events don't always directly correlate to the prime reality of the Remedy connected universe. By acknowledging the expansive nature of the multiverse while maintaining a prime reality in their storytelling, and then weaving that multiverse into the prime reality, Remedy has allowed for fans to really declare that yes, it's all connected, even if the law would never allow Remedy to directly endorse that statement. However, this is just my take on things, and I encourage everyone who's into this sort of thing to forge your own theories and understanding of Remedy's many worlds. Anyway, that's it for today. That is my thoughts on Night Springs. Again, if you like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing to Hidden Machine or checking out the Patreon channel memberships. Great way to support us and help us do what we do, which is making videos and, doing that. If you want to talk more, meet us down in the comments. We can talk about your theories or hop into the Hidden Machine Discord. Links down there. I'll see you soon. Thanks for hanging out. Goodbye.